If you go in and estimate accounts regularly or just periodically, and you go to the meter changeout on somebody that you've estimated, we're warning you here that we're going to be counting previous meter readings as actual readings. We're not going to do what we call corrections of estimates at this point because we're not actually doing a calculation. We're just putting in information that will be used in a calculation later on. But because of that, it can't take all this information into consideration when it tries to do corrections of estimates. So, is it a horrible thing? No. Most of the time it won't be a problem because you're getting an actual meter reading off the meter. 80% of the time, probably, it is going to be higher than the estimated reading, and so we generally don't have any problems at all. But I'll show you some ways around it just so that it doesn't go bad for you, I guess I'd say. The meter changeout screen is in two parts. The left part over here is the information that's on the old meter, and the right, the information on the new meter. So we're going to start over here on the left-hand side and talk about the three fields over here. Now, once again, like I said, the screen's pretty straightforward, but it can cause people some issues. The first thing it asks you for is a date. When was the meter changeout occur? Well, we're going to say it happened a couple of days ago. Because it wouldn't probably have happened the same day. But then it's going to ask you meter reading information for the old meter. When it was pulled out of the ground, what was the reading on the meter? Or, if the meter was pulled out of the ground because it was broken, in other words, spinning wildly where you can't trust the reading, or frozen where it's not moving at all, you really can't trust the meter reading on there or use it possibly for the changeout process. In a case like that, you can use the bottom option here and put it in the usage. Now you can do the same thing with this account. Since the last reading was estimated, you can say that this person probably used something like about 3,000 gallons because they've been on the system for a while since the last meter reading was taken. And that, if you noticed, is going to change this value up here, increasing it by 3,000. The same thing would happen if we come up here and we put a meter reading in. You'll notice down here at the bottom it has changed the usage to add up to whatever the last time it was read and the reading that I just put in. Now, looking at that bottom field down there, that usage field, will probably save you more headaches on this screen than anything else. If you look then at that value down there, it comes up to be thousands and thousands of gallons, tens of thousands of gallons, that you know the customer never could have used. You probably want to cancel off the screen and verify the information you've been given. It's possible you were given a wrong meter reading, or it was numbers that you just couldn't read or were transposed on there. And you may need to talk to the meter reader that did the work to get their clarification or confirmation on what is on that piece of paper. Because we definitely don't carry 9 million gallons of usage over, which does happen, I won't say super frequently, but has happened a few times here in the recent past. It also sometimes happens that the meter changeout was actually done before the last meter reading was put in. And so you're putting in a reading that is less than the last, which is going to cause a huge amount of usage down here again, because it's going to cause a false rollover. So you're going to have to take that in consideration sometimes as well. This can also happen if we do a meter changeout process for you, in other words, a mass meter changeout, where a different organization may give us a list of all the meters and their readings, their information, and stuff like that, and when we put all of this in for you. The same things can happen there. If they give us a bad reading, well, we're going to figure a bad usage. If they give us a reading that occurred before the previous reading, there's going to be a few million gallons out there that we're going to think needs to be carried across to the next billing, rather. So all of this needs to be kind of looked over, even if it's just vague, and especially needs to be looked at when you do your verifying, your next set of readings, to make sure that we haven't missed anybody and we're not just tremendously over counts. Okay, we're going to go with this usage here. So it's going to carry 5,050 units across from the old meter to the new based on the reading that we put in here. Over here on the right, this is where you're going to put in all the information about the meter that you've been given. And you'll need varying amounts depending on how you read meters. If you are somebody still goes out and walks the routes and manually writes down the meter readings, the meter number, the ID number, and the meter type aren't always, MID type and number aren't always needed. You may want the meter number on there because that is the serial number of the meter, and oftentimes the reader will verify they're reading the right one, or have to use it if it's got like a wall of meters in the side of an apartment complex or something like that. Meter reader's been with you forever. They're going to know where every meter is in town better than anybody else, and really they don't have to have any of that information. We, though, have to have certain bits of information to be able to calculate. We have to know the rollover digit. In other words, how many of these digits over here do we look at before we need to know that it probably could have rolled over. The multiplier on there, how many fixed zeros on a new meter reading do we have to put on there to get it right? On this one here, it was probably set to 10 before because there's only one fixed zero there at the end, which sorry about that. So on the old meter, it may have been 10, but on the new meters, it's going to be 100. And that's fine. We'll take that into consideration and figure it up correctly, but we just need to know it. Now, unless you're doing gas, your usage multiplier will always be 1. The usage multiplier that you see there, if we haven't told you before, is just for figuring out gas pressure adjustments so that we figure the gas usage correctly. So for any non-gas customer, it's always just going to be set to 1. There's no pressure on the water that has to be accounted for. We also need to know if it's in gallons or cubic feet, just so we know how we're calculating everything. Now, for a lot of people, you only use one type of meter, and you may not have choice here because it may be set to where everybody is in gallons. All units are the same. And this may be kind of grayed out or fixed where you don't even have a say in it because we know it's always going to be gallons. Just like these two fields over here, actually these 3 fields, may be pre-filled for you because there is a place in setup where we put in the meter defaults. So unless you're changing everything around, which some people do, and go from hundreds to tens or hundreds down to 1 multipliers, these numbers will fill in probably accurately for you. Now, if you're changing the way that you read everything, and in the future everybody's going to have like an 8 rollover digit, let's just say, and a 1 multiplier, we can go into system setup and we can set those defaults for you so you don't have to fill these in here. It'll do it for you. The only time you'd have to fill them in are for those odd meters, maybe like for larger industrial meters or something like that, where there is still going to be a reading multiplier at the end. Okay? Then lastly down here is the reading on the new meter rather when it's starting out. It is a brand new meter, probably it's going to start off at 0. Some, I do admit though, start off with all 9s. And some customers test their meters regularly, and if everything works properly, they just put a refurbished meter in the ground with new equipment on the inside, new guts of the meter. And so this reading could technically be anything. So just make sure you put in the right reading so we know what we're starting. I'm just going to put in 0 for right now, and I'm going to go ahead and save because that's all there really is to it. So once you save it, you're going to get this report here, which for some people is useful, and some people just kind of turn it over and use the back paper. But it shows you what's on the old meter, what's on the new, just so you can make sure you've got that information to show that it was changed out, and you can go back and reference it later on if you need to. Some people do keep this in the folders of their customers just so they can see when changeouts did occur. If you didn't have all that information as far as like the ID number and stuff like that, if it wasn't included on the paperwork you got, you can always come in here and fill it out afterwards. Includes the rollover digit and the reading multiplier. We just kind of like these filled in to begin with because they will affect the readings up here that we're going to be doing for the next reading. So I messed with it so much that I got it confused, and it's got a huge amount of usage out there. So excuse me. So try to make sure that you have all this filled in, or if you don't, make sure you get it filled in before you're going to do your next readings. Now, in my case here, since it doesn't work correctly because I didn't have the right previous reading in here, and so on, quite possibly, you can come in here to extra info, and you can change this usage down here to whatever you want it to be. So technically, if you were given a wrong value, you can go in here and change it. Or if the meter was broken and you didn't realize it, and the reading you put in generated thousands of units of usage, you can come in here and change this to whatever value you want. It will show you afterwards that somebody's edited some of these different fields when you come in here, and that's mostly just for your benefit more as much as ours, to let you know if somebody's in here doing something. But you can come in here and change them if you want to. Now, you can also come in here and delete the meter change out and go back and do it again if it hasn't been used in a calculation yet. So I can hit this and go back and do it all over again, and it's now gone, and I can go back and put it in correctly. So if the meter was broken and spinning wildly out of, where the numbers that are on there we can't trust, I'm going to put in 2,000 units, and all this was what I changed it to before, so I'm just going to put in a 0 for a reading, and I'm going to save that. I'll get my report again, but this time the numbers over here on the account are a little bit more reasonable, and you'd be a lot more comfortable using that whenever you go in to do your next billing. Okay? Now, you can also come into edit readings, and you can correct the values here if you want to, including the usage, and it will change it under the extra info screen, and also change it up here so it uses it correctly when it does your next reading cycle, whether you're printing up the information to give to manually walking the route, or whether you're sending it out to a reading device of some kind, be it vehicle, fixed base, or just a touch read device. So it'll have the right information on there for your meter readers to do their job properly. So all in all, like I said, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is look at this number down here at the bottom. If you're putting in a reading, make sure the usage that's down there looks reasonable, or it's not going to work right. You're going to get some bad usage like I did and stuff like that. Okay? Now, the meter change-out process will show up as these green lines here. They are the bridge, as you can see, from meter to the new meter, but the usage is on both lines. That doesn't mean it's going to be double billed. It's just showing what was used on the old meter, what's going to be added into new, just going forward. Our old software, old DOS-based program, and that I've seen here recently, will rewrite all of this history in here to justify this instead of making these transition lines. We did this on purpose just to make it easier where your history all stays intact and you can still move from one meter to the other cleanly and still have all that information intact as well. The only other thing I want to mention, depending on the version that you're on, older versions, if you did a meter change out and you put a new reading in and went to verify, meter change out was going to show up on that reading even if it was already used in a calculation. But once you do a cycle closeout, any meter change out that has been used in a calculation will get closed. So if you see some weird numbers on your verify report, if you're verifying before you did your cycle closeout, you might want to go ahead and close that out and try the verify again and see if you're getting more realistic numbers, because it may be you're on an older version that wasn't doing it correctly and was just adding those numbers in when they shouldn't be. That would be my other bit of information that that I might give on there, other tip I guess you should say, because it is all the time. I went in and put some code in to try to fix it, and except for just a couple of occasions over the last few years, it looks like I actually got that part right. I have had a couple that mess up, so you may have some just, and it still adds it in and I'll have to take a look at it and help you with it. Other than that, do we have any questions on the process? Anything that I perhaps didn't cover well enough for you that you want to go over again? Or just questions about various occurrences that might have meter change out that I really haven't talked about?
So we do have a question. We have one that says, if you have an outstanding usage from a year or more, how do you get them to correct?
In other words, it's been like a year since the meter was read last? Is that what you mean by that?
And that is what I'm thinking. I will see if, yes, that is correct.
Well, if the meter was correct last time it was read, then the usage on the now should be a reasonable amount to where
it was a
where it's
final
going to
bill.
figure up a normal usage. But if it was somebody that was finalized out, 6 or 8 months ago, the only thing you could probably do, the only fair thing you could probably do, is to put a usage in there instead of the meter reading, because you don't want to charge the person for 6 months of usage when nobody lived at the property, or possibly the previous tenant left with the water dripping, or perhaps cleaning service went in and used a few thousand gallons to tidy up the place after the last tenants or owners left. So, in all fairness, you would probably want to use this bottom option down here and come up with some value that you feel is fair. Now, I know the different parts of the country handle things like final bills differently. In some parts of the country, the new tenant is responsible for anything that happened after the old person left, no matter if it was from the old person or not. So even if the old person left with an outstanding balance, in some parts of the country, the new tenant has to pay for that. So it kind of depends on your bylaws, but in my mind, I only want to charge the person for what they may have used or maybe their responsibility. So I mean, if they came in and asked for the meter to be changed out after the, then if you're kind enough to do it for them, you might just want to give them a 0 or some nominal amount down there that might be from a clean card by that new tenant to clean up the house or something like that.
And then just to clarify, the person asked the question said this usage is on for the state report and they needed to take it off the usage report.
Well, if the usage hasn't been used in a calculation yet, you can always delete the meter, change it, and go back in and fix it. If it has been used in a calculation, the applied reading that was put on after the meter changeout is where that usage is going to be residing. So you would actually have to edit that usage if you don't want to charge them that, and perhaps reread the bill that you last billed them to give them a more realistic reading. If this happened months ago, there's not really a way to edit it in the system as far as, well, like let's say down here. If your changeout, we realize this October reading down here was wrong and we overcharged the customer, we can't really go back and fix this now. The best you can do is either put an adjustment on the account or do something with the usage in the bill you're generating now to make up sort of like a manual corrections of estimates or something of that nature. Once again, the usage may be the fairest way to do that, because you really don't want to put in a wrong current meter reading, because that's also going to affect your reading that occurs. So trying to adjust the usage itself is probably the fairest way.
Yeah, and just one last clarification. They said that when they do the cycle closeout report, some months have a big usage on them on the inactive account.
Can I repeat that one more time, if you would, please?
When you do the cycle closeout report, some months have big usage on an inactive account.
Yes, ma'am, they can. If you read your inactive account, we don't charge the accounts for anything. We're just allowing people to read them so they can check for, well, leaks that may have occurred, or check for people stealing water and different things of that nature. So we are going to track the usage on there that goes reading the meter reading. So just like on any active account, if there's a bad meter reading put on there, we're going to figure out probably a bad usage for it. It's just going to show less or less likely for a lot of people because they're not seeing that charge when they're scanning down their verify report or their calculation report for that matter, and they're not looking at that ending usage that is at the end of the report showing that there was 9 million gallons of usage added in that normally they will see. So if they don't catch that, it may be something we have to go back and fix after the fact. But since it is in an active account, the usage isn't actually generating a charge, so really the only thing you have to go in and do is find the account and hit edit readings and go in and adjust something in here. You may want to fix the meter reading as well as the usage. If you notice, like, for example, 2 digits that's on here were transposed, causing it to generate 10 million gallons of usage or something like that. And you may be able to come in there quickly and easily fix it, and thus fix the usage as well, and then run your reports again if you haven't already closed out, and you'll get a realistic number on there. Now, if you don't look at your cycle closeout report and you do close out the cycle, I don't really have a way to regenerate that report. The best we could possibly do is just go in and run one of the usage reports into the setup screen, or into the report screen, excuse me, and get the monthly usage for that billing period and on that report as well, and make note that there was a correction made on such and such account after the fact when it was discovered that an inactive account was read wrong. And that way you'd be able to get the accurate usage for that period, and perhaps staple just the 2 reports together so that you can has been corrected, or use the usage report in its place.
And then this is the last follow-up to that same question. After all that, then you have to do a reread after you change that account if it's not going to have a reading?
If you've done a meter changeout already, if you've done a cycle closeout already, you can't go back and reread the account. You can only reread applied accounts. So it all depends on the situation. Now, depending on which one of the scenarios we're talking about, if you have, if you're talking about the meter changeout and the meter changeout was just done wrong, yes, you have to go in and do a reapply again if you caught it after the time you put in your new reading to come up with a correct usage. If you're talking about the inactive account or something like that, to where the old reading was wrong, it didn't generate a charge, and so no, you necessarily wouldn't have to go back and reread an inactive account that was misread during a period. Not unless you just want a nice, clean calculation report that doesn't have information on there.
Okay. Our next question is, on the new meter information, could you tell me what the type drop-down box is above the units drop-down box?
Okay. It's the same thing as on the screen over here, and it requires a history lesson. When we were rewriting this program from our old database application, we were actually under an umbrella of companies that was controlled by Census Technologies. But out the auto read software that probably some of you use. They made certain requests from us, more requirements and requests, that we include information in there to make it easier for their customers to do things. These are all meter types that the Census Technology Group uses for a variety of things to tell them what types of meters that they may be dealing with. You can use these if you want to, or you can just type anything in there and it will start using that instead. It doesn't have to be on the list for you to enter it in there. Now, the same here with the meter number. We increased this with the leading zeros in front of it because the folks at Census told us they were going 10-digit or more meters, and they needed to be numbers. So we made them numbers, which means they're going to left fill with digits to fill everything out to 12 characters. And that's also why the ID number field is 20 characters long, because it told us it had to be longer than 10, because very quickly it would go over 10 digits. Now, very quickly seems to have a bit of a different value as far as time per step, because we wrote this program a little over 15 years ago and it hasn't got over 8 digits yet. So it's there in case we ever need to use it. But you will see different things in the program, and that's also technically why, if you look at your reading setup screen for handhelds, Census is separate. They didn't want to be mixed in with everybody else. Since they were at the time, we had to go through and do all of that.
Okay. Our next question is, when I do a meter changeout, it seems to take 2 months for it to show up on the route for the meter reader. For some reason, the new meter numbers are not mapping over the routes for the meter reader. Then the account shows up on the unread meter list.
I don't know why that would be, because
scenario.
technically if I went in here and did a change out, let me delete the one that I just did a minute ago. I'm just going to put my same 2,000 units on here. But if I come over here and I change these values, as soon as I save this, it's updated. It should have updated the meter information on the account. It goes out to the handheld during next time. So the only reason it shouldn't show up for your handheld device or on your meter reading worksheet is if they'd already been sent out at this point in time. If the reports had already been printed or the file's already been created, it would have the old meter's information in there, and technically that wouldn't read it because that old meter doesn't technically exist anymore. But that would be the only reason I could think of.
All right. And then this is another kind of question statement scenario. In regard to the meter changeout, meter number, and the meter ID, they have found that if an MXU is changed out, that the handheld will pick up another meter number that is not reflected in their system. But when changed, the meter number to the number shown on the handheld will pick up that reading.
Okay, the meter number itself is the serial number on the meter. And to the best of my knowledge, no handheld actually looks at what that is. That's only there usually for, well, back in the day, when people were doing touch reads or just typing and reading things on the meter, it would show the meter number on there so they could verify they were reading the right meter. The handhelds themselves usually only carry about one of these two values here, or sometimes both, depending on what handheld software you're dealing with. Most handheld softwares just need one identifier to be able to talk with the meter, and so that I usually put in the ID number field. Now, some systems, and there's actually 2 or 3 of them now. I know Census does it, and Beacon, I believe, does it as well, and I think there's one other one. They actually use both these 2 values, one being the identifier for the meter itself, sort of like the serial number, but a little bit different, because it is a different number than the serial number. And then this value here, the MID number, which is technically supposed to be the identifier for the MXU. That's the number that the handheld is directly communicating with, not any of these values up here at the top. In fact, in this value, the way it's set up, this is the MXU, and the next 10 digits would be the MXU number. Because some systems have, well, Census, for example, has a meter type that tells them how the meter is being read, whether it's manually or electronically, and then they have an MID type or MXU type, which identifies the type of meter that it's actually talking to, so it knows how to interpret that reading. Sort of like these guys were down here back in the day doing regular touch reads and such. So I guess long story short, this number up here really probably shouldn't matter with most handhelds, but these 2 would. And depending on the software that you use, if you're told you have to fill them both in, there should be a meter identifier that you're given for the meter itself, and there should be an MXU number or even perhaps an MXU type and number, which you would need to fill in on this field for companies like Census to be able to read the meter. I don't know if that answers your question or not. If it doesn't, let me know what I didn't explain, and I'll go back over because I may have got a little too carried away.
They said if they change from a touch read to a radio, should the type be changed? They have been using type B.
Once again, that depends. I'm assuming you're using Census because that's the standard Census type. Usually the meter type down here, if you're, well, Even if you're doing non-vehicle read units, this is going to stay a B for forever if it's being electronically read. This number up here, though, might change dramatically to something else. For some of our customers, it's still a B, but for some of them that are using SmartPoint or some of the other different types of census equipment to read with, that can be a C. And I think there's another letter as well, which I've forgotten what it is, because I don't have too many people asking about it. They usually get that from the census rep, and so I don't have to go through it with them. So I just don't remember the other letter, but that letter right there will probably be something besides a B.
And yes, they do use census.
Yeah, that's the main people that have a B down here, because that's been their standard code for electronically read meters for as long as I can remember. But other handheld software have different values that go down here, and some of them will not have letter codes up here at the top. They just have one meter type, and that's usually what goes down here. This may be just a straight 10-digit number for some of you folks. I don't necessarily think you have to have a letter. Now with Beacon, there is a different letter down here than there is up here. This will tell them if it's reading water, gas, or electricity. This just tells them if it's being electronically read or not. Sort of like what's sent.
And just following up, they also said they use letter C for MID, mid. So would that be changed?
You have to get that from the folks at Census or whomever you're using for the meter reading, because it could change it. I don't know, quite honestly. For some people, it's a B still. For some people, it's a C. And like I said, I think there's another letter, but I can't remember what it was used by AutoRead. And then, of course, different handheld softwares are going to have different letters. So I would probably double check with their support group, and they can tell you what code's supposed to be that goes in that goes before the digits.
Perfect. Well, does anyone else have any other questions? We can wait a little bit, or Jimmy, if you think of anything else you might want to touch base on, feel free to.
No, I mean, the only thing I always say, and I say this in trainings when I'm talking on the phone with people and stuff like that, and you folks have been really good at it, the ones that keep attending these. Let me know what you want to talk about, what you want me to talk about, I guess I should say, or what you want to hear. I'm happy to go over anything in the program that I can. The whole concept of this whole setup here is to try to pass more information on to the users, especially users that can't make our national conferences, which we know that for some people are rather impossible to make because of travel and everything else, all the expenses involved. So I want to try to cover as much stuff as we can to help you out. So please keep giving us ideas of what you want to see, and we'll keep putting these. And if you, and don't feel embarrassed to ask any questions, but if you are, I mean, I'm a horribly embarrassed person myself. I hate talking in front of people. So doing this is a lot more pleasant than standing in front of a crowd of you trying to talk. If you don't want your spoken out, just put a call in afterward and say, hey, I'd like to follow up on the last webinar. This was a question that I had that I didn't think of at the time, or what do you want to say? And we'll be happy to give you a call back as soon as we can and talk it over with you so that we make sure that you understood or everything was taken care of that you needed to know about whatever we talked about.
And again, this is recorded. We had some technical difficulties. I switched computers in January and lost a lot of data and had to start over again. So these are going to be sent out within the week now because I have everything lined up the way it's supposed to be. And so thank you guys for your patience on the webinar from January that took 3 months to deliver. And then we also, yes, give Jimmy ideas of what to cover in these webinars because I asked him and he's like, I don't know. And I was like, but you know this. So it just helps us because we're kind of over here trying to figure out, we're throwing spaghetti against the wall, trying to make sure that we're finding something that's relevant for you guys. And so the more the merrier. We love being bossed around. It'll be easier for us in the long run. And we do webinars on ICIS. We don't do it on particular versions. It's just going to be a general webinar on the Impressa. So if you want to ask me more about it, you can definitely put in a call. And if you have particular questions you want to be addressed, I can work with Chris on that as well, and see if that's something other people have questions about. So we do have ICIS webinars. All right, does anyone else have any other questions? All right, well, okay, so Jimmy, I'm going to let you answer this. Someone asked, are you using an older version? Is there a charge to upgrade to the new version?
Not if you're on a current support agreement.
So
That's
as long as
free
you have
all
a
the time.
support agreement, then we do updates. It usually takes about an hour and a half. So if you are interested in that, just put in a support ticket, and you can do that by emailing inHANCE support at harriscomputer.com, and that would create a ticket. And then we can follow up with sales if we need to get, some sort of support agreement or quote, or just go ahead and work with Becky to get it scheduled. Well, Jimmy and I are going to hang out for a little bit longer, just in case anyone has an idea that pops up into their head and they want to ask it. But otherwise, we are pretty much done, unless, Jimmy, anything else?
That's it for me.